Hello guys and welcome back to another video. In my last video I asked you to join me in a little experiment, play a few matches back to back and see what kind of patterns you notice. Well, in the last days I sat down and played 8 matches in a row on Nuketown, all with the M4A1 sticking to the exact same playstyle, and let me tell you, the results are very interesting. Because it is pretty clear that the matchmaking isn't just skill-based. In fact, there's no skill-based matchmaking, right? This is what we're led to believe, because if traditional skill-based matchmaking was working the way it's supposed to, you would be matched with players of similar skill levels, right? Yes, but that's not what's happening here. Instead, the matchmaking feels deliberately unbalanced, and it's like a roller coaster. Win one, get crushed the next, over and over again. And there's no real consistency or flow to the games. And the community has suspected this for years, and honestly, it is laughable that Activision remains completely silent on the matter. Meanwhile, the player base is steadily dropping, and the numbers, like Steam charts, they don't lie. So in this video, we're going to dive into the data I gathered from those 8 matches and take a closer look at how this so-called matchmaking system really works. And spoiler alert, it's not about fair competition. So forget everything you've been told about skill-based matchmaking, because this isn't about fair competition or balance in lobbies. It is only about control, because the system doesn't care about your skill, it only cares about keeping you in the game. Frustrated one moment and on top of the world the next. It's a manufactured roller coaster designed to mess with your head. Alright, with that said, now it's time to break down the 8 matches I played, and we're going to go through each round individually, and I'll show you all the key stats for every game. At the top of the screen you'll see the average KD of my team, the average KD of the enemy team, my personal KD, whether I joined the match in progress, and of course, the final result of the game. For each round, I've edited the footage to highlight the most important moments, some eliminations I got, sometimes where I died, and anything weird or suspicious that stood out. It's all cut together so you can really get a sense of what these matches looked and felt like. And what makes this even more interesting is that I took detailed notes on each match, right? I wrote down how the game felt, what stood out, and what I found frustrating or unusual. And you see those notes come into play as we go through the matches, giving more context to what was happening in real time. So let's dive into each round and see what the data and the gameplay reveals. Alright, let's talk about round 1. Right off the bat, I joined the match already in progress. The score was 47-92 for the enemy team, and this is not exactly the kind of start you want, right? And to make things even worse, I was greeted with packet burst right as I spawned in, and from the very beginning, this match felt completely rigged. And I mean, it's frustrating enough to be dropped into a losing game, but what makes it worse is that this seems to happen way too often. Not every time, sure, but it's common enough to notice a pattern. You join late, and you're stuck on the losing side, and in this case, my team was spawn trapped, and breaking out was nearly impossible. Now, 2 specific moments in this match really stood out as red flags. First, there's a clip where I die, but before I go down, I take 2 hit markers from somewhere. Like, to this day, I have no idea where those shots came from. And what's even weirder is that if you look at the health bar in the bottom left, it's completely untouched, right? And you can hear the hit marker sound, and you can even see the indicators showing I was hit front left, but there's no damage. And the same thing happens in the kill cam, which I slowed down for you guys. So right before the Semtex explodes, you can hear 2 hit markers again, but they don't register visually, right? And then I die, and I think that is kind of weird. And there's also a second clip that is weird to me, because I'm shooting at an enemy, and out of nowhere, I take 2 hit markers. But again, there's no damage, and moments later, I get instantly lasered, so I include the kill cam here too. And what's funny is that you can see that I got a packet burst at the same time. You can also see that the enemy has kind of a hard time killing me there. And honestly, this whole match just felt off. Enemies didn't seem to die as quickly as they should have. I felt like I was taking more damage than them, and it just seemed like my team was at a constant disadvantage. Whether it's connection issues or something deeper in the system, it's hard to ignore how off everything felt in this game. Let us move to round 2, and this was a fresh game, no mid-match joining this time, and right from the start it felt pretty solid. Things were flowing well, and you can actually see that in the gameplay. I managed to secure a few quick kills early on, and for a moment it felt like the match might go smoothly. And you know, guys, it happened again. That feeling of being instantly punished kicked in, and the match took a strange turn. Now, this might just be an observation, but I've noticed something. Weird things seem to happen more often with players who are using skins, right? For example, there's a moment in this round where I'm shooting at a player from behind, and I guess I land 3 shots, maybe 4, and as he starts turning around, before he even aims at me, I'm already taking damage. And you'll see it in the clip, his weapon doesn't even fire, he's not looking at me, but I get hit markers, and then I finish him. Right? It's honestly hard to explain, but it just feels off. But overall, the match started out feeling relatively balanced. It seemed like we had a fair chance, but as the game progressed, it became clear we're going to lose. Even though my team wasn't bad, when you look at the stats, like the average KD for both teams, you can see that the enemy team had a slight edge. And to be honest, it was kind of frustrating because for one moment it felt like this could have been an even match, but by the end, it was kind of obvious we were at a disadvantage. Now, round 3 was yet another match where I started in a losing team, and right from the start it felt like one of those games, you know, the type, and I was dying almost instantly to enemy gunfire, and it felt like I was being completely lasered by opponents over and over again. But then out of nowhere I managed to pull off a nice streak here and there. Everything suddenly felt smooth, balanced even, I would say, and for a brief moment it felt like the game was giving me a fair shot. And of course that didn't last long, because toward the end the match started to feel rough again, and I experienced a couple of packet bursts and noticed some weird inconsistencies in my aim. And this is where things actually get really strange, because there were moments in this game where it looked like I just couldn't aim properly, and I'd be shooting at someone and my shots would completely miss, like fly to the left or right of the enemy, because my aim was just off, even though my aim felt perfectly on point. Now, I'm playing on PC with a mouse and keyboard, no aim assist or anything, but sometimes it genuinely feels like there's something working against you, almost like a magnet force that's pulling your aim away from the target. And I guess if you watch the clips, you'll see what I mean. It's especially noticeable in 2 specific moments, one where I was shooting at a guy between the buses and another where the enemy was further back. And I don't know how to describe it, but it just feels like the game sometimes has other plans. Next up is round 4, and this was a fresh game, and we actually ended up winning, and pretty decisively too, but man, this match felt weird from the start yet again, and right off the bat I had packet bursts before the game even began. There were a few players on the enemy team who kept taking me out repeatedly, and it felt like I just couldn't kill them no matter what I tried, but there's one specific moment I want to highlight. And it's actually kind of funny because one of the opponents literally says, "shit game," in the game chat, and honestly, I totally get that. And overall, this whole match had this constant swing between good and bad, because one second it felt fun and balanced, and the next it was just frustrating. And even though we won, it didn't really feel satisfying, and this was one of those games where by the end I thought, yeah, well, I'm done for the day. I don't want to play anymore. One of the least enjoyable rounds was round 5, and you guessed it, I joined mid-match again, this time into a losing team with a score of 7-65. So yeah, not the most promising start. At one point I was sitting at a 2-10 score, just getting completely lasered by certain players, and right from the beginning the game felt suspicious. Right? Some of my teammates were even talking about it in voice chat, saying things like there has to be skill-based damage, and the theory being that Call of Duty wants the sweatiest players, so the ones who basically live in the game, to always have fun. And it's almost like the game decides it's our turn to lose this specific match. What's weird is when you look at the stats, because the average KD for our team was 1.22, while the enemy team's was 1.0. Now, I know that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it is still strange. You know, it's just one of those things that make you go, well, doesn't feel right because we got railed this game, kinda, and it didn't feel like the enemy team had an average KD of 1.0. And I did manage to claw my way back to a 10-15 score eventually, but the game still felt terrible. Like it was my first time ever playing on mouse and keyboard. And my teammates were frustrated too because they were constantly questioning the spawns and saying things like the time to kill in this game is all over the place. And I get it. It just feels weird. And honestly, they're right, because every match seems to have at least one player who just feels unkillable or is lasering, and in this game, there was one guy in particular who kept lasering me, and I struggled so hard to take him down. But this particular guy finished the match with a 31-33 score, and I was like, what? This doesn't add up, because it just felt like the guy was crazy good, and I don't know, I couldn't kill him, he just lasered me, but apparently it looks like he had a hard time too. You know, it just doesn't add up. So yeah, this game felt also weird in so many ways. I don't know. I don't know, man. I don't know how to explain all of this. Next up we got round 6, and honestly it was alright. I would say nothing too crazy, nothing too exciting, and the match was actually really short, and of course I joined mid-match again, but this time the score was tied at 28-28, so at least it felt fair from the start. But again, there was this one player who kept lasering me, or at least it felt like that, you know, but overall the match was okay. But still, these moments where things felt a little off, you know, just the casual Black Ops 6 experience, and 2 enemies actually left the game towards the end, which is kind of telling, because we ended the game with a 250-65, which is not too bad. And this was also the first match where I managed to earn my helicopter, like my streak, you know, so that was a nice little highlight. But even in this match, I had that weird feeling again, like something was messing with my aim at one particular time. I think when I was shooting that guy in the window, yeah, it's like a magnetic force that throws off your micro adjustments. You know, it feels like someone suddenly cranks up your sensitivity and you start missing shots that you would normally hit. This is how I would explain it. But I don't know, maybe this is just in my head, but it happens often enough to notice if you ask me. And anyway, we crushed the enemy team, like I said, so it wasn't that bad at all for us, and I don't think the enemy team had a good time though. So yeah, it was alright. Now we are on to game 7, and yes, who would have guessed I joined mid-match again. And this time the score was something like 20-40 when I got on, and the match itself, you know, nothing special, pretty much just another laser fest with a bit of spawn trapping here and there. And what stood out this time was that I actually experienced some latency variations, which is something I've only seen maybe once or twice since I started playing Black Ops 6. And usually it's just packet bursts, but this time was different. And of course there was someone in the lobby who could just tank insane amounts of damage. Again, this is just an observation, you know, but I noticed once more that these players often seem to have fancy skins or unique weapons. You know, I'm not saying there's a direct correlation, but it's definitely worth mentioning. There was actually one thing that was pretty funny because it caught me off guard, and I got hit by a snowball. I didn't know that these things could one-shot you. But still, there was a moment that was far from being funny, because I was jumping down that balcony during one play, and I mean, I slowed it down to analyze it, and even though I know I missed some of my shots, I just got completely deleted there. I mean, it is what it is. It wasn't terrible, but it was one of those games where you just shrug and move on, you know, nothing too wild, but at least it had a few moments, you know, just the casual Black Ops 6 experience. And now we have arrived at the final round, round 8, and right from the start I could tell this match was different, because it felt far from the average experience I had in the previous rounds, and for once I wasn't immediately lasered off the map, and everything just felt normal, smooth, fair and rewarding. So the first note I took was literally, this seems to be a good lobby, and it really was. There weren't any strange encounters with players who felt unkillable, no moments where I was left scratching my head thinking, what just happened? And this time, there were no weird things, no bizarre aim inconsistencies, no spikes in difficulties, so to say. And I even managed to get my helicopter streak once again, which feels like is a rare achievement in this game by now, and it felt like a proper reward for playing well. The final score was a 3.38 KD, and we won the match 75-44. And honestly, this round was in a league of its own compared to the rest from before, and it wasn't just good, it was the best game I've played all session, and that's saying something. Yet one thing that is strange is that this match felt exactly what Modern Warfare 3 feels like, right? If you ask me to describe what Modern Warfare 3 feels like, it is exactly like the game I just played, round 8. Because we have smooth gameplay, we have fair lobbies, somehow consistent mechanics, and an overall enjoyable time. You know, and I just wonder, why do I get these kind of lobbies in Modern Warfare 3 over and over again and not in Black Ops 6? So after 8 straight matches, it felt great to end on a high note, to be honest. And looking back, the contrast is wild because I started this session with a 0.7 KD in the first round, also had a low point of 0.83 in round 5, and then finished here with a 3.38 KD. And this kind of range just shows how inconsistent the experience can be. And this last match was really completely different, right? And matches like this, with how this round felt, are the reason why you come back and keep playing. And everything was consistent. You had no packet burst, no weird issues popping up, you know, just a smooth experience. And of course, the good KD also plays a role, but this is exactly the kind of match you wish for because it feels rewarding. Alright guys, and now I think we're coming to the most interesting part of the video, because this next section is where we analyze the data and really pick apart Activision's claims about skill-based matchmaking, which we know is no skill-based matchmaking, right? This is only engagement-optimized matchmaking. And after watching the gameplay from these 8 rounds and experiencing firsthand how these lobbies felt, it is time to dig into the numbers and the so-called research behind their system. And specifically, I've reviewed the paper titled Matchmaking Series, the Role of Skill in Matchmaking. And we will go into the data shortly, but still I have some stuff I have to get off my chest, because if we put it bluntly, the claims in this paper are nothing but public relation trash designed to pacify the community. Because I searched the document for the word fair, which appears 7 times, and let me tell you, there's nothing, literally nothing fair about their matchmaking system. The paper is filled with empty buzzwords and vague statements, but when you play the game and collect your own data, it quickly becomes clear that their system is fundamentally rigged. And this becomes very obvious if you recreate the experiment for yourself, right? Because with these data points, you start noticing patterns, and none of them point to a fair or skill-based matchmaking system. And if you just take the first game as an example, you can see that it is not fair, because my team had an average KD of 1.0 while the enemy team averaged 2.0. And that's not skill-based matchmaking. This is blatant imbalance right from the start. Because if the system were truly about skill, every game would feel consistent. Like consistent playing the same game over and over again. I think this would also get very boring, right? And players would hover around their usual KD and face opponents with similar skill levels. But instead, what we see is wildly inconsistent lobbies where the outcomes feel predetermined. Sounds familiar, right? And you guessed it, this is where EOMM comes into play. It's not designed to be fair, not at all. It's only designed to keep you engaged. One game you dominate, the next you're stomped into the ground. It is engineered frustration, guys. They keep you playing by giving you a taste of success, even just a small one, only to punish you in the next match. And sometimes it even feels like the rigging happens mid-match, right? But that's a whole other conversation for another time. But the bottom line is this, right? Before we go into the data, actually, the system is rigged. It's not about fairness and it's not about skill. It's only about manipulating players to stay engaged for longer, no matter how frustrating or imbalanced the experience might be, because they don't care. Okay, so Activision claims their system is fair, balanced, and above all, fun. But the data I've got tells a very different story. So Call of Duty argues, and I quote, "Team balance is vital for ensuring games are fair for our players. The goal is to make the outcome of a match as unpredictable as possible." Sounds good on paper, right? But unpredictable outcomes don't always equal fairness. And in fact, the data I have analyzed shows the exact opposite. Inconsistent and chaotic matches that feel anything but fair. And they also claim overcorrection can lead to large fluctuations in the skill of players someone is matched with and against, and can result in unfair matches. Which is funny, because that's exactly what we're seeing. My data shows round-to-round KD fluctuations with a massive standard deviation of 1.03. And this is not balance, that's chaos. It's completely rigged. And a balanced deviation here would mean that the fluctuations are small and consistent, indicating a stable system where results like match quality or player performance are predictable and fair. You know, like what I explained before, every game would kind of look the same, right? And in our example, we had a standard deviation of 1.03, which is kind of high, right? Players might go from dominating one round to being completely outclassed in the next, and this inconsistency is what you're calling out as chaotic rather than balanced. And if the system were balanced, you'd expect the standard deviation to be much, much lower, indicating that players are consistently matched with others of similar skill. And high deviations mean the system is overcorrecting or failing to adjust properly, leading to unpredictable and unfair matchmaking outcomes. You know, they also say, and I quote, "The skill disparity rules are concerned with minimizing the difference between the worst and the best player in a lobby." Sounds also good, right? But in practice, right, it's a mess, because my analysis found no meaningful correlation between player level, prestige, and performance metrics like KD, because the skill gap isn't being minimized, it is being exploited. Because the correlation between prestige, level, and KD ratio is approximately negative 0.0057. And this is a very weak, almost non-existent negative correlation, indicating that there is no meaningful relationship between a player prestige, level, and their KD ratio. And they also claim to prioritize grouping similarly disparate parties together, but the fluctuating eliminations, deaths, and KD ratios in my data tells yet another story. The system isn't balanced in skill, it's only manufacturing outcomes to keep you hooked. Higher level players sticking around in later rounds, paired with chaotic matchmaking, and that only screams for engagement optimized matchmaking. It is only designed to maximize playtime and not fairness. And are you ready for the most craziest part in that paper? They say, one of the goals of our system is to give everyone a relatively similar matchmaking experience, a fair shot at achieving and experiencing the range of outcomes. But my data shows this isn't happening. Round to round KD changes are all over the place, and matchmaking isn't consistent at all. If you're at the bottom, you're staying there. If you're at the top, they're throwing you to the wolves. And it's not about fairness, it's about keeping players engaged, like I said so many times. They even admit it. You know why? Because they say, if low-skilled players engage less, the higher-skilled players become the new low-skilled players. The translation here is, they'll rig the system to protect new players, even if it means sacrificing the experience of veterans. Because your skill doesn't matter, the algorithm does. And does that sound familiar, guys? Right. I said that before. I said that this system, skill-based, engagement-optimized matchmaking, the system that we have in Call of Duty right now, is to shield the average player bubble. There's no reason to have this for higher skilled players, because the higher skilled players, all the players that are mad at this system because they feel punished, they're all right. And this proves that we all have different experiences when playing the game. All these people leaving Call of Duty are the players who are better than average and are getting punished. This is why these people leave. This is why Steam charts and Reddit is full of people saying Call of Duty is dying. It will never die. It dies to the players who have common sense, to the people who are skilled in Call of Duty. But there's so many people out there that do not care about what people say about Call of Duty. They don't watch YouTube videos. They don't know about the rigged system. They don't know nothing. They just play. Like in their own paper, they contradict themselves. This is crazy. This is hilarious. And I said it before, and I'll say it again. This isn't about fair matchmaking at all. It's about profit. By making matches more chaotic and unpredictable, they keep you grinding, frustrated enough to chase that next fair match. But here's the problem. Fairness isn't the goal. Your engagement is. And that's why the system feels rigged, because it is. So, what's the takeaway here? Call of Duty's matchmaking system isn't broken. It's working exactly as intended. It's not designed for fairness. It's designed to maximize your time spent playing. But do you know what's actually fair? Accountability. But instead, Activision gives us this nonsense saying our objective is to deliver a fun, fair match. Right. Look, Activision, fun doesn't mean getting stomped by pros because your algorithm decided I needed some unpredictability in my life. And it also doesn't mean pairing me with Timmy No-Hands who can't aim and thinks sprinting into enemy fire is a viable strategy. And I really don't understand their matchmaking system. The developers keep saying they focus on fun and fairness, but as we've all experienced, that's far from reality. They always reference their data, claiming it backs their approach, but the problem is you can't rely solely on data because numbers can be interpreted wrong. And I honestly think that this is what's happening here, because it is possible that the people working on the system just don't know what they're doing. They might lack the expertise to properly analyze or interpret the data they're using. But here's my suggestion. Next time, if they're going to base their matchmaking systems on data, they need to involve actual players who play the game. Because right now it feels like they just look at the data and say, oh, this is what it shows, so this must be what we need to do, and implement systems without fully understanding what fun and fairness actually mean. So it doesn't matter your skill level, how many times you've played Call of Duty back in the days. If you want proof, if you want to prove this yourself, you can try this experiment. Play 10 matches on the same map with the same loadout and playstyle. You can play aggressive, passive, or neutral, just stick to one, and I guarantee you, your stats will fluctuate. Average players with a KD below 1.0 might not notice much difference because they're considered the average casual player, but for anyone above average, the system grinds you down over time. Trust me, I promise you that. And before we dive into my final conclusion, if you found this video helpful or interesting, please consider leaving a like. It really helps the video reach more people. And if you know someone who might benefit from this information, feel free to share it. And don't forget to subscribe, because it's just one click and it makes a big difference for creators like me. And I'd also love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, as always. And now, onto my final conclusion. So I spent hours, honestly, I think half a day, gathering these data points and writing things down. And while it felt like a waste of time at some points, because I really didn't want to play Black Ops 6 half a day, I'm actually glad I did it, because it was fascinating to see the clear correlations in how this matchmaking system operates. And the biggest takeaway here, and what was really interesting to me, was that higher prestige or level doesn't necessarily mean a better player anymore, at least not in Black Ops 6. And maybe that was true in the past, but not now, because engagement optimized matchmaking has created a system where everyone seems equal, but in reality, it's manipulating matches to keep players engaged for longer, not to create fair or skill-based games. And the system is fundamentally flawed, because even their own papers contradict what they say about matchmaking, and while they claim skill is important, my data proves otherwise. Skill isn't a factor at all, because it is just mind-boggling that they would even release a system like this, especially when it's actively pushing people away from the game. And seeing such a massive drop in active players just a month and a half after launch is no surprise if you ask me. So yeah, this has been a frustrating but also funny and eye-opening experience. So thanks for sticking around, guys, and I hope my data helps shed some light on why this game feels so inconsistent. I hope that you'll uninstall this game and not play it anymore, because it is not worth your time, to be honest, guys. So see you in the next one, and take care.